The highest paid male supermodel in the world.
Been the face on billboards in Times Square and starred in music videos with A-list celebrities.
Kate Moss and Naomi and Chrissy Turlington, they were brands within the fashion industry. You, of course, had to get noticed was to work with a major fashion house. You hear about what the female supermodels are making, and of course you want to rival that. 350 days a year for this amount. What if you got an exclusive contract and you worked 2 days a year for that same amount? My agency said, you are Dolce Gabbana. Believe me, if you're constantly pushing those boundaries, you're gonna have imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? I'm gonna get found out.
We're rolling.
I'm ready.
Great to see you again, David.
Good to see you, sir.
How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. Not bad.
What's going on in your life now? We were talking in the spring. You
Yeah.
were moving houses.
Building houses.
Yeah, building houses.
Yeah, moving, building. That's a big project we're doing at the moment, which is exciting, really, really exciting. A project a size I've never taken on before, but I didn't need something this big before, but now I have family and children and everything else. And if you get children, all you understand is that you need space. And then when you get space, you realise you need more and more space. Anything to keep the kids quiet and entertained, I suppose. So yeah, it's an exciting project. We've got that, and of course we've got Wellwear, which we're coming up to our year anniversary. And I've also, can't forget about the old job, which is the modelling, licensing side into the fashion as well. So very busy time at the moment.
Yeah, I want to dive deeper into that. You've had a very interesting career, I think, with a lot of different crossroads and decisions that you've been taking throughout your life. And I want to start off with asking you, you've been in the modeling world for a long time, and the highest paid male supermodel in the world. And there are a lot of models out there, and there have been throughout the years. What is it that you think made you rise to the top of this league?
Good question. I suppose in many ways we saw it as I ran it as a business and a brand more than, when you say modelling business, I say sort of fashion business or the fashion world. So the connotations or the pigeonholing of being a model, of course, has changed a little bit, but not so much. And I saw something within the male modelling industry that I thought I could make an impact on. So I saw where, as from being a male model, you could reach, and it was never to the heights of where the female models were going. And I questioned this. And I questioned the contracts we were on, and I questioned everything about it. And that's where it kind of started, and saw I suppose you can see in many ways, running as a business, you saw a gap in the market in many ways. And that was a lot to do with a strategy to get us there. And I say us because the important part of this is working with Tandy Anson and the Select Modelling Agency team, who I've been with for 22 years. And a lot of agencies would not have, I suppose, worked with me on this. We were... it was something very risky, something very different, and but it paid off. And that's sort of the way I suppose I differ from others in many ways. And a lot of male models, they will come now to talk to me and say, how did you achieve what you achieved? How can I get to the same success maybe? And I talk to them about what what you have to do and how you have to dedicate yourself. And when I'm saying dedication, it's also sacrificing. It's not sitting at home waiting for your agency to call. There's a lot of sacrifices of being made. You're self-employed as a model, and I haven't stopped pretty much. That's the difference as well. It's like working very, very hard on what you want to achieve and setting goals, and those goals shouldn't really change. The way you get to those goals do change. I call it a game of chess. You're making your moves in many ways, and you have to adapt sometimes, and then other opportunities are open to you, and you either decide to take those or not. But it's a constant decision from you. But the game, the goal is where do I want to be in 5 years, and where do I want to be in 10 years, where do I want to be in 15 years. And we've worked towards those goals and moving the pieces to hopefully get there.
Were you always this goal-oriented when you got into the business, or was that something that gradually happened over time that you were like, wow, I want to reach, I'm seeing a vision here?
There was definitely a vision. Goal-orientated growing up, I can't really say, but it was working up was just growing up was just hard work. I learned that from my parents. They had their own businesses, and it was, I suppose, ground into me that I saw them when you're in business. There's lots of advantages to it. The other advantage is from 7 o'clock until midnight you're working. You're never off, and so that was just a natural thing for me to do, which I suppose is in hindsight it helped me a lot. But yeah, goal orientation is something I believe in. If you don't have a goal, how do you know the direction you're going in? You're waiting for, otherwise you're waiting for, I suppose, other variants to take you in different directions, whether that will be. Mm-hmm. But if you've got a goal and you know that's where you want to be and that's what you want to achieve, again, those goals can increase a little bit, they can change slightly. But you've got to get there. And then I suppose one of the things I can do is I can see how a decision 1 month can impact something 5 months later. And even in the company with Wellwear, I say we're doing this now, and they can't. Sometimes the team can't see why this is so important to me, but I can see where that could lead to. Now we could plant 10 of those seeds to where I want to be, and 3 of them come off, and a lot of them don't. But you have to sort of get to that point of taking those chances and seeing where those seeds can grow, and hopefully a few of them do take off. But that's what I always do, and that's where I've always seen it. The goal originally in modelling was, well, I was a name within the industry but not out of the industry. And if you looked at all the names of female supermodels, when you talk about Kate Moss and Naomi and Chrissy Turlington, Cindy Crawford, they were brands within the fashion industry. If you said Kate in the fashion industry, you knew Kate Moss. If you said Naomi, you knew Cindy, same thing.
They're all first name, artist name basis.
And they built their brand, and they were brilliant businesswomen at the end of the day. So that was the platform that I kind of instilled and said, right, so it's about branding. You had to start building that brand. You of course had to get noticed. To get noticed was to work with a major fashion house. That was Dolce Gabbana. That was Light Blue. Now I'm very fortunate that Light Blue came about, of course, and it was as big as it was. But that was a stepping stone I then needed to then put a name to who that person was. So then we started building that, and of course gradually that builds, and you get noticed, and you build the covers, and you build the branding, and you do your own book, and then you do the underwear line with Dolce. And then what people don't understand is that when I wanted to do my first own line, a collaboration of my own fashion brand in many ways, the seed was planted for that 5 years prior. Then you have to still build your brand up to that point that you can do that, and then work towards that in many ways. So that's how far in advance I'm thinking of where I want to be in many ways.
And you said when younger models, or I guess younger people in the fashion industry, comes and ask you for advice, the business is, I guess, a lot different now from when you were in their age, possibly. Yeah. And you see it in acting, you see it in music, where the gatekeeper and the middleman kind of goes out in a way, and you have a more direct relationship with consumers or fans and so on. Yeah. Do you think, how do you apply your learnings to whoever comes up and asks you for advice today? Do you think it's a very transferable skill, so to speak, or
what you just said there is completely true, and I'm very honest with guys who, not just in the fashion world, I've had people from young chefs and actors and approach me about advice, and I say the same thing, is that it's a very different world to the one that I started in, especially in the fashion world. There are advantages again. You're probably talking about social media and the direct interaction with fans and followers and brands. You're less reliant on agencies now, of course, or management, but it's still an important factor. And of course, you can build this following. To build a brand when you were looking at, back in 2006 when I did, you needed to work with a fashion brand. You didn't have social media. If you wanted to be, in the press, in the papers, on billboards, you can't afford that. But now that's social media. You can get that following immediately in some ways and build on that and money, to monetize that as well, of course. And that's what people have done. And that's where we understand influencers, and the brand now use influencers and YouTubers and gamers, but then that's moved on, of course. You never thought about gamers before, but now brands it's such a sort of wildly watched now form of entertainment that, of course, brands just will look at numbers and engagement, and that's what they look at more than, I believe, more than the creativity. That's why I've seen, from my point of view, I think the creativity is completely diminished in many ways. Where you used to have these Vogue and GQs and billboards and campaigns and these iconic images, you very rarely see it now.
You mean the creativity in the actual productions, as in? You
had to create something. When we say with Light Blue, we had to create something that was going to be aspirational. You had to tick all these boxes. This is why you use the genius of Dolce Gabbana and Mario Testino, and Dolce still do it. Still shooting campaigns with J-Lo, and they're on billboards, and it still works. Gucci are another brand that's still, obviously creative. That creative element is important to them. But for smaller brands, of course, the world is now open for them to create something of their own. But you're not going to have some of the best photographers in the world and those high production values and everything else. And that's where some brands have reacted to that by saying, we'll go online and we won't do the billboards and creativity. And so they've gone down that avenue as well. And that then, when you have these iconic books from these iconic photographers and brands of everything they've created, because that was the way we had to market, you're not going to see that anymore. And it is quite disposable. Disposable in the fact that you might have seen, you'll buy a magazine and see these campaigns, or you see it on a billboard. Don't see them that often. But of course now we're flicking through with our thumbs on Instagram and TikTok, and we're seeing, goodness knows, hundreds of different creatives every hour. So it's got to take something to stand out, of course. But I'm not saying anything against it, because I sort of love these alternative ways in many ways. It's not for me, and I always say I don't put my private life on, or much of my life on social media. It's a lot to do with business. So if that was turned around now and I was 21, 22 when I came in the industry now, I wouldn't have achieved what I would, because I wouldn't be willing to put everything on social. So it would have changed.
So you're kind of grateful that it happened for you?
Very grateful. Very, very grateful. Yeah. I'm like really, really, to do it before all social media and the internet, of course, was around, but social, pages, then yes, absolutely.
And speaking of Dolce Gabbana, was there like one moment, or was it more of a gradual period of time where you felt that, your world changed basically because it all went so quickly up?
Yeah, I suppose people look at Light Blue, and I say without Light Blue, which is the famous commercial which we were shooting a update of last week in Capri.
And the first one was also in Capri.
It was, always in Capri. And but then, and that obviously it changed from that campaign launching to the next day, literally press banging at the door at my agency's door saying, "Can we have interviews? And we need to know who this person is." So yeah, of course that changed. But I know the work that went into getting that, and people might think they just chose me, but actually that started in my first show season. I did the Dolce Gabbana show. The second season, I was on option for a big campaign and refused to have my hair cut for the show because they needed longer hair for this other campaign. I couldn't do the show. Or Stefano and Domenico said, "You either cut your hair or you don't do the show, or so I didn't do the show.
Because you would lose that other.
Because I also lost the campaign as well to the other one I didn't get chosen, so it wasn't a good week. But I suppose it was that steadfastness in me, and that maybe that stubbornness that knew what it took as well to I suppose sort of believe that I was making the right decisions all the time. And then that was probably 2002, 2005. Then that was when we orchestrated to go and meet them again. And that was my agency, Tandy Anderson, who said, you are Dolce Gabbana. Believe me, everyone was saying you should go for Armani or Ralph Lauren, you'll definitely get one of these. And Tandy had this vision saying, Dolce, that's the one. And there was a party in London for a great photographer friend of mine, and Tandy came up with the idea of me coming to this party to say hello to Domenica and Stefano again. And obviously I changed at that point. I was gone from, I suppose you're at that funny point at 21, 22, you're not a teenager and not a man, and then you change a lot in that sort of 4 years. And then they saw me and said, hi David again, and 2 weeks later booked me for the campaign. And then from the campaign that went very well, and then they booked me for the show, and then Select started talking to them, and then that's when Light Blue came about. So there was a lot of stepping stones to get to that point. And of course, I suppose a lot of people could have sat on their laurels on that. One of the biggest campaigns turned out to be one of the biggest campaigns, an iconic image, and not done anything. But that to me was the starting point to where I really wanted to achieve. And that's where we went from there.
And during that time, I mean, I guess it's been throughout all the years in the fashion industry. But during that time, did you feel that there was this, male ideal that you did fit into or not fit into? I guess, as you mentioned, Ralph Lauren, they had their certain type that they shot. But were you directed a lot on the way you were supposed to be looking? And
no. You mean outside of? I mean, the campaigns, the editorials. That is a team. That is a production team. There's the best stylists and everything. So you don't have much of a say. But I wanted more of a say, and of course, I then wanted to be an individual, and the brand has to be an individual. In my point of view, so I've never had a stylist. Never had a glam squad that people seem to have now. So yeah, my idea was creating something for myself, and I was known for sort of I love tailoring and I love suits, and was starting to get known for that in many ways, because it was a little bit against the grain with dressing down nature, which we've come back to a little bit, but suits weren't a major thing. And I was walking, I was in 3-piece suits and 2-piece suits, and getting suits made by Tom Sweeney and Savile Row and all those different things. And then that sort of came about again. I was sort of known for that, and very fortunately then, received, people seemed to like what I was doing, and I was then winning awards for Stylish Man and things like that. So, but that was again from knowing hopefully where my brand needs to be, and me being steadfast in the fact that I wasn't going to be one of a crowd. I was different to that. So I wanted to, not purposely different, it's the way I felt comfortable. I dressed for the way that is comfortable for me. Some people like it, some people don't, but that's the way I feel most confident in at the end of the day.
And I remember hearing you say, I don't know if that was on a podcast, but that there was this, was it in America, there were a certain ideal, but as in parts of the other world, like in Europe, for instance, you wouldn't supposed to be as big as a male model. You were, maybe not supposed to work out that much if you were going into high fashion. And
that was I guess that was the time I came into fashion was not a time for sort of muscular, bigger, trained people. It was about the Dior guys, the androgynous look, and of course, within fashion, everyone seems to do the same thing, and all the guys were, and all the agencies were choosing those guys, and all the shows were the skinnier guys. So yeah, when I was casting for something, I couldn't fit the trousers on. I couldn't put. Not that I was big anyway. Like when I came into 22, but 21 or 22. But I was always training my life, and it was just at that stage. And then I started to, for my own well-being and for the way I felt more comfortable, was to be fit and healthy, and that included training. So I was getting bigger, and of course, the bigger I got, the less clothes I was fitting in. But I wasn't willing to. But from my point of view, I looked and thought, does this cycle change within fashion? They are going to go back to at one point, maybe after the more classical bigger guys of the 80s and the 90s, and this is just a period, and then it will change. And pretty much what light blue did, But when Dolce Gabbana came to casting, I believe came to casting light blue, of course they wanted this in what they envisaged in their head, and then they were choosing from a smaller pond because everyone had, copied each other and gone down this other route. And so yeah, I fitted their idea of what their vision was, and luckily sort of created what we did. But yeah, so that's of course that then changed, and then everyone tried to pursue and copy the light blue. Guy started training.
So that was kind of a deliberate decision on your side then, that you wanted to, stay in the type of body that you felt good about, instead of adjusting to whatever the industry asked for you.
Whatever industry I would have been in.
Yeah.
I would have looked the same. I would have trained. Yeah. I'm not going to change my way of sort of looking. A lot of people would, and that's understandable for them, but not for me.
Have you seen the movie? It's a very new movie called Triangle of Sadness.
No.
It's in the beginning. It's about male modeling casting. I think it's a very funny scene where they asking some to do the H&M look and some to do the Balenciaga look, and it's like the grumpy look and the happy look, and it's a hilarious scene. I want to hear from you if it's very accurate.
I've never heard of the looks of the certain brands, but I do understand it's a lot of people when you're doing campaigns, they say why don't you have a smiling campaigns or something, and as if you're just you're never smiling, but there's different if you do whatever the creative is for the shoot, something more commercial is going to require something a bit more smiling, a bit more sort of reportage, and then for campaigns you're not really there with a beaming smile, but there are campaigns with, it depends, every campaign is different. So no, it's I do totally understand what they're saying about that.
The movie actually got its name from what they call, the casting director in the scene calls the Triangle of Sadness, which is when you're making that face. It says lose your Triangle of Sadness to the to the model in that case. It's a great movie. I saw it last week.
Okay, I have to shut that out.
And it's a Swedish movie, so I'm a bit biased. But I think that's very interesting to think, when you're looking back, what are some important crossroads that comes to your mind, be it personal or career-wise, that could have gone, both ways, that could have been to the right, to the left, and you happened to go to the right or the left. Are there things that come to your mind that, it's kind of a butterfly effect? You wouldn't be here if you would gone the other way.
You can think that both ways. You can think of if something had happened afterwards. You make the decisions. I very rarely look back. I don't believe in regretting something, because you're not quite sure. There's also those moments that you said, yes, I did that and it worked out well. There's probably a lot of moments that you did something and you might have missed something. You might have missed an opportunity. If I didn't turn up to Dolce at that dinner, would it have affected you? Yes, it probably would have. So it's taking those opportunities. But there's so many, and that's what people don't kind of realize. It was the decision to give up all the commercial work and the campaign, not the campaign work, but the commercial catalogue work, because I was not enjoying it. So I wouldn't have stayed in industry that I wanted to create. I wanted to work with the best creatives. I wanted to create something which I thought was iconic, and it's, don't use that name sort of lightly, but that's what the light blue has become in many ways. But
the commercial would have been a more direct, financially better way to go at that point, I guess. No, it's not.
No, I mean it is. You earn very good money, but it wasn't money I was thinking about in the long run. Probably in the short term, in the long run, of course you do. You hear about what the female supermodels are making, and of course you want to rival that in many ways. So, but again, that was this decision that we've negotiated on campaigns where I said to guys, so you're working 350 days a year for this amount, and you're flying around the world doing this, and what if you got an exclusive contract and you work 2 days a year for that same amount? That kind of thing, that would never happen. Never happen. I was like, okay. It did happen. So I knew it existed. Okay. So that was the way I thought about it. But that requires you to then not work for a lot of different companies. That's another thing I don't. Once Dolce used me, I was very loyal to Dolce and the brands before. Massimo Dutti, Jaguar, all those different companies. I was after Light Blue, of course, you then have a lot of brands who want to use you and say, can you come and do our show? Can you come and do our campaign? And I didn't because of my loyalty to Dolce. I felt like saying to them, I've been around for a while. I was, you could have given me the opportunity, but you didn't. Now you want to sort of have me on because of where we are and the amount of coverage we're getting. But I was just steadfast with Dolce, and we're still working together to this day. That's since 2005 onwards. But you can say it could be since 2002 when I did their first show. So it's been nearly 20 years, 22 years I've been working with them. And that's very rare in the fashion industry to have that amount of loyalty. Very, very rare.
Yeah, I guess that's even more rare now when, as you said,
absolutely.
It's just the competition is getting more intense, and you have more people popping off, but also having a shorter.
Yeah. Well, this is the way I look at. I suppose the disposable creative of something like social is that someone will be they're looking at watches and then they'll show you a watch Hugo Boss one day and then Breitling the next and saying, oh, this is the best and they're the best, but there's a lot. That's the way they are used in that many ways. When I worked for brands that I believed in, very loyal to those brands. We approach brands I want to work with as well, where we think we've got a good rapport and a good connection. So yeah, there's what I stand for. And if I put something on social, a lot of those brands aren't paying me. This is what I did first of all to a lot of brands. Tom Sweeney, my tailor to this day, good friends now. They asked me to come on and would they like some tailored suits. They were the best suits I ever wore. They got me, they had shots in all the red carpets, Men's Fashion Week, me in Tom Sweeney suits. I didn't make anything from that. That was just, helping a brand and helping some good guys out. I don't think that really exists anymore either.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
During these interviews, I've traveled around and spent a lot of time in many different airports and airplanes. And if you traveled from any of the major Nordic airports last year, you probably know the security lines that were 3 hours long and that we had a so-called mountain of luggage. And I learned the hard way because that's where my bag was buried for weeks. So that's why I'm very happy to announce Sequel's partnership with American Express. And I've been an American Express Platinum member since a long time. And that's just saved me so much time and headache in traveling especially. And as a member, you can use a fast track line to skip the waiting in security at selected airports. And their travel insurance is one of the strongest on the market. So when my bag was lost, I was reimbursed for buying a set of new clothes, and they help you with many other things that can go wrong when you travel. So if you also want less headaches and a better experience when traveling, you can find out more about the Platinum card in the description below or on the American Express website.
But before you, when you went into the fashion world, was there ever an alternative path that you were thinking about? Could there, at that age where,
No, I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
That was coming out of university. I went to university. As I sort of famously say, the only thing I learned at university was that I shouldn't have gone to university. But I followed, again.
Why is that?
I suppose I learned that because I followed what everyone else was doing.
Okay.
You've got to follow your own path. I got decent grades. When I work at something, I can get very, very good grades. But academia, that setting, I felt from school to university was just holding me back. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to explore. I wanted to sort of go my own way, and my work ethic I knew would hopefully get me there. not sort of grades. So I was never worried about that. So yeah, it was. I'm not sure what I could have ended up doing at the end of the day, but there wasn't a crossroads that. But I just knew what I learned, and I did, computing multimedia, which actually at that point was quite an astute thing to do, considering the world we are in now. But I knew it wasn't something I wanted a future in.
So when you were there, you were kind of following the stream, but this must have been then a very different stream to what everybody else was doing.
It was a big right turn.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd never aspired to be in the fashion industry. One thing I loved, I always loved design. Cars were my passion, design was my passion. Not that I could afford to build houses or buy houses, but that I realised that design was a major impact in my life. And even I sort of realised I was going to charity shops or vintage shops to buy clothing, not elsewhere, because I was quite specific about things I wanted to wear. But of course I didn't have any advice. I came into the fashion industry, there's no one in my family that could have given me advice on that or branding or anything else. So this is all things that we learned. We made mistakes and we made some good decisions, and it's worked out okay.
Have you had a mentor during this time, like no one you've been calling up for?
In some ways, it's very, very difficult to have a mentor because no one had done what we're doing. When I spoke to the female supermodels, if I was fortunate enough to work with them, Chrissy Turlington. But you also take something without speaking to them. Chrissy turned up, no entourage, just her and her dog, but saw the brilliance of the charm she had with the crew, with the brand. And then you look at someone else who had one example of a guy who was on the brink of really making it quite big, and I saw him, the way he treated people at a campaign, and he thought he was a lot bigger than he actually was. And I thought that was the wrong way to go, and you soon get found out a bit, really, in many ways. So it's observing. I always said that 5 years. I didn't know anything about the fashion industry. I didn't know how it worked. Didn't know anything about castings, fashion weeks, anything. So that sort of 4 or 5 years between when I started and got Dolce was a lot of observing, in the industry and realizing how it works. And then sort of impacting on that, really.
Have you, during this time, had, this kind of imposter voice in your head? I guess that can happen, especially when you come from the outside and there's so much to learn and there's so many people, maybe even especially in this industry.
Yeah, imposter syndrome. Yeah. It's a constant, even to this day.
What has that voice said?
I don't even know what it said. And the way I take it is that you feel like you're going to get found out, like you shouldn't be there. And there's a lot of people saying, I do find a lot of people, like I said, when I said about the contracts and working so many days a year, but having an exclusive, you'll never do that. That's what I've heard most of my career. You'll never be able to do it, and that pushes you on even more. So maybe it's not your voice. You have to believe in what you're doing. You've got a lot of people around you saying this isn't possible. But also I'm a realist. There's a difference. You have to be realistic thinking you're true. I would love to be a vet. I would give up everything to this day to go and have a veterinary Even today. Give up everything to be a vet. But I'm realistic that I'm never going to get those grades. So I'd be a brilliant vet if you didn't want your dog to survive the surgery. But until that, so I'm a realist behind, and that's what people have got to be. There is still an aim to where you need to be and a goal, but you've got to be realistic about it. And realism has slightly, in this world, has changed a little bit. And it's very hard for people to say, I want to get where you have been. Do you think I could be a model? And you look at them and you think, and I just say to them, if you think you can, but go and compare yourself to the best models at the moment, the best influencers, and if you think you can rival them, then yes. I can't say whether you can or not, but it's up to you to decide or not. So, I was never. You got to know your pros and cons, I suppose, in many ways. My advantages. I'm not great in front of camera. I'm not a presenter. I'm not. I could never do any of that. That's not me. If anything, I've gone to behind the camera more than in front of the camera. People never understand that either.
That's true, yeah. No, yeah. But when somebody comes up and asks that, so you think it's more about their own belief in what they're able to do rather than, you know, look at me and do you think I would make it or not? You believe it's more in their head?
The fashion industry the modeling industry is based around the way you look.
Yeah.
That's the fundamentals of it. If a brand thinks you're right for your creative, that's basically it. There's no, okay, maybe the acting industry. It's an important part, but you also need to know how to act, of course, otherwise you'll be found out pretty quickly. So the fashion industry is based on that. So yes, it's tough to say you either look right or you don't. But there are so many different models and looks, and there are runway models and campaign models, but again, this is all changing. But fundamentally, that is so. It's a very tough call to say, and that's why I would never judge anyone to say. And if they say, "How do I get into modelling?" I can give them advice. I say, it's down to the modelling agencies really, and down to the brands. That's it. If they want to take you on, they think there's some real hope in you doing well in this industry. That's down to you. It's not down to me. So I just concentrated on where I thought I could be, and that's if we were, the androgynous world of skinny models carried on. Of course, I wouldn't have done as well as I did or have done in the world. So, but it did change, and I hopefully saw that change coming, and that's where that's sort of the difference. So people need to be a little bit realistic sometimes about what they can do.
And the industry, the fashion world, maybe even especially the modeling world, is a bit notorious for, as you say, mental health. There's a lot of problems with eating disorder and a lot around it. What's been your relationship with that? Have you been able to withstand mental health?
Probably get from what I said about me going my own path. That was me being healthy. That was me doing stuff for my mental well-being, that I was okay. I was a little bit older in the industry. I was 21, nearly 22, so you maybe think you got a bit of an older head on your shoulders to be able to make those decisions.
So being 21 is considered being older?
In the fashion world, it is, yeah. But you've got kids of 15, 16, so it's you can be influenced a lot. But I think the fashion industry takes a bit of a hard brunt on that. There's eating disorders everywhere. There's mental well-being problems in many industries. We talk about where you have to be anything really where I believe in sort of modelling. You are looking at health and fitness and being in shape. You don't have to be in shape to be a model, of course, but it helps. And when you're looking at that, then you're looking at sports people, ballerinas, dancers, jockeys. There's can be problems everywhere. It's not just the fashion industry at the end of the day. So, which is something I talk about. I talk about mental well-being. It's something I talk about myself. So, and talk about if I've ever had dark times or any problems, I'm quite open about them, which hopefully helps other people at the end of the day.
I guess a lot of people don't see somebody like you having an imposter syndrome. I think that's, maybe that's hard to imagine for a lot of people, but what is it that you have to say about, insecurities that you've had yourself? Has that been...
Imposter syndrome is, again, I don't always think it's a terrible thing, because I think you should be pushing the boundaries of where you can be. And if you're constantly pushing those boundaries, you're going to have imposter syndrome. You're going to be in a room, or you're going to be in industry or situations or anything with a lot more experienced people, but they were in that position once. And they probably were, that first day thought, what am I doing here? I'm going to get found out. That is imposter syndrome. And then you have to prove yourself to those other people. And then once you get to that level where you think you've hit that experience, and you get to that next level. And that next level, whatever it is, whatever you want to achieve, you probably will in those first few years go, What am I doing here? Am I out of my depth? And then hopefully you'll conquer that one. So that's my beliefing. It's not, it's, you know, we talk about it as a negative. And with the imposter syndrome, with being in newness and industries and pushing boundaries, you'll probably will have a bit of anxiety, but you have to sometimes engage your mental well-being as negatives into a positive, and that will push you. When, you know, to me, when I have that imposter syndrome, or when someone says to me I can't do something, that's my push to absolutely keep pushing on and on and on and get the best at where I can be in that, and that's belief. And you have to be steadfast in your, otherwise not listen to people. And it's difficult. It can be to filter out the noise. I always sort of say there's a lot of people that if they think you're going to achieve something they can't, they don't want you to achieve something. You have to remember that. Have to remember that. Always be very careful about the person you tell good news to. You want the people, always remember that like, a good friend or a good person will be thrilled whatever you're achieving.
Have you had that? Have you had those type of friends where you felt I can't really share these news because I don't really know? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it's a very interesting way to put it, actually, that maybe when you're asking yourself, when will they find out about me? Maybe that even, maybe that's a good sign that you're on the right track. As long as you're on the right direction, that you're, you know, I'm probably somewhere else compared to 6 months ago. Now I'm pushing this in the right direction. I like that, you know, you're making that negative into actually, you know, I've been developing here.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's something I believe. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying anything I say is correct. I give my experience of what I've done. And it is. It can be, but you know, the anxiety and the imposter syndrome is something that I believe you are going to, you know, to have as something new. But that to me means you're pushing the boundaries, and you're trying to achieve your goal at that. I think I've done it in the fashion world. I've starting my own brand. When I came to work with M&S and not knowing a thing, I do know now because that was my education in M&S to learn how to create a brand. Cutting materials, fabrics, marketing, designing, all those things I had to learn. I learned that in the 6 year stretch with M&S. I didn't know how to do that, first of all. And of course, when that goes on sale, you'll think, is anyone going to buy this? And everything you do is that. Is anyone going to like this, going to like what I'm doing? It's... But same with writing. You know, I still think to this day, you know, I have Vanity Fair and the Telegraph. I'm thinking they're never going to ask me to write another article, surely. It's very difficult for me to write that, but people seem to enjoy it. So, but that first article, I was like, what? You know, can take a good writer an hour to write something. I was about 2 weeks into an article going, I have no idea what I'm doing here. There's no lesson. There's no quick lesson you can learn how to write a motoring article for Vanity Fair. But you have to be on it. You have to, you know, some people are going to like it, some people aren't.
Are you still writing?
Yeah, not as much as I would probably like to, in many ways. I do enjoy it when I can.
Do you feel you like it more than you're good at it, or are you good at it more than you like it? Because I also do writing, and I don't love it. Yeah. But I think it's pretty easy for me to write. But I don't love it. I don't like it that much, but I do it anyway.
I think you're writing something you're interested in. Yeah. I always make sure.
Yeah.
If someone approaches me about writing something I'm not sure about, or I can think for my own interest, that would be really interesting, and researching that and then developing that, then I'm more interested. If it's something I'm not interested in writing, then I have to say I don't enjoy it. But I love talking about like the history and the story, like a good story behind a watch or a car or clothing or something else. That's or design. That's interesting to me. But I've been stuck trying to work out how I'm going to either start or finish. And sometimes it will come to me if I'm in the gym. I'll be talking to myself about the article. I think that's a great way to end it, or that's a great middle. But then where am I going in between here? So it's a different way of writing. But I'm very jealous of professional writers or journalists who I've been on launches and I just see them on the way back in the car to the airport, file it,
Right.
done.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my goodness, that's
Going a week to the countryside and just having
pretty
a book
much
done.
it. And I get back home and complete writer's block. But it's fun. But again, you know, it's people ask me back to do it, so they must think it's pretty decent in many ways.
Would you say that you're in a happy place now in your life? Are you feeling good?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same as anyone else. You have good days, you have bad days, you have stressful weeks. Content, I suppose, is a little bit. I think if you can be content with where you are, sometimes it's. But again, I put myself in situations because that is always going to be stressful. You know, a new dad, most stressful thing, most wonderful thing, but it changes. It's the biggest change in your life you ever do. You know, you're and then on top of that, you build a house, start a business.
Yeah.
Still building the old businesses. That's stress, and sometimes it's rewarding, and sometimes you think, what am I doing this for? But in the end, you know, children are a wonderful thing because you're doing a lot for them, really, at the end of the day. You know, you want them to have the best life, you perceive the best life and education and everything else. So there's an incentive to carry on, but always make sure that, and then you've got to get that balance right between, of course, personal life and work life, of course, which is probably the most difficult thing. So yeah, it's a stressful time, but it's always, there's a stress. I mean, people, I was at we were clay pigeon shooting, and the guy was trying to work out, because I couldn't hit any of the easy clays. The most complicated clays I was shooting every time, and he said, your brain works in a very strange way. He said, you make life very hard for yourself. So even something pleasurable like that I was for some reason making it hard. He was trying to work out the way to explain something, the most difficult clays I could get. The other ones I wasn't really interested in. Okay. That was the challenge. And that's where I think my life sometimes, like, it's the challenge, it's the risk and reward. Yeah. And if I didn't, that's what retirement's for in the future.
And I guess, I mean, starting the brand is also a very new challenge. Is that something you've been thinking about for a long time, and that's been developing? Because you launched it now in the end of 2021.
Yeah, we're just nearly a year old now. Yeah. It seems longer.
Yeah.
It's gone quickly, but there's a lot happened in that year. A lot happens in a day, a lot happens in a week in this business. So with the challenges, of course, M&S, as I said, the goal to me was, I would have liked to, however that looked 10 years ago, and my name on a clothing brand, to be in complete control of the creative, of the designs, to bringing a team I loved working with that had the same work ethic as me, and I could control that. That was always the aim, but of course, I didn't believe I could do that. That's knowing my limitations. I couldn't. People can now, of course. You can with social media. You can start a brand. You can get a few T-shirts made, and they might take off, and good for that. But I didn't. I wanted to start something much bigger, and of course I had to go and learn how to do that. And that was, you first do that with collaborations, and that was with M&S. But of course, M&S, you don't have the stresses of funding, investments, payrolls,
everything.
Marketing costs, advertising costs, absolutely
connecting
everything.
The cables to the computers in the first day.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's when the team comes into that as well. Of course, having an incredible team around you, and I talk about my work ethic. The people that work for me have to have that work ethic, and they have to believe in that brand, and they do. We're a small brand. We've all got, like I said, 3 or 4 hats on. You don't just come in, you're a designer stroke working with, you need to know your web stuff, you need to know you're doing banners, and the same for me. So my role that I thought I was going to be in as a founder of a brand has changed for sort of very much, and that's when that team needs to come on and take some of that work away from you, and I need to go off and do lots of different things as well, and make those opportunities for that team and the brand. And I suppose I had a bit of a different thing where I thought it'd be lovely in the office designing a few pieces, and we do that now and again, but it's a very small part of it.
What is your role in the company? Are you more to the CEO side or the creative director, or doing a bit of everything? Or
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. So yeah, there's lots of different hats we all put on. But I love the team. I trust the team. They've all got their different roles, and I trust them. I don't want to step in my mark too much. I have to make those decisions, those final decisions, and that be on me. If it's right, we're right. If I'm wrong, it was my fault. Don't want to blame anyone. But I never want to interfere too much and micromanage anyone too much. But I've got a brilliant team who I trust, usually. But I do need to make this decision sometimes, looking over the whole thing and changing direction or changing where we're going or what we're doing next season. And I need to make those, and you need to find funding and investment to be able to do that. So yeah, it's a founder's role, a CEO role. Yeah, it's a creative director. I say it's sort of creative direction. I think the creative direction of the company, of a fashion brand, is where one of the most important areas is, and you base everything around that. You have to believe again where that brand is going to be. So with Wellwear, we've always gone on the ethos of we're creating a different clothing category. We're bringing wellness and apparel together for the first time. Never really been done. We're seeing other brands do this now, by the way. They're taking the same, putting treatments in their clothing, and sometimes you're onto something. You've got something right when other brands are starting to do what you're doing. So yes, but that's our aim, that's our ethos, and then that's where we want to build from there. Where we had to get that stability, those foundations right of where we were. But I had those foundations, of course, already from working with the collaboration. People knew what I stood for. They knew what I stand for in my brand. That hopefully I'm very authentic of what I say, and what I put on my social media isn't being paid to do. And I am a believer in what I'm putting on those items, and I believe in the clothing brand. And we're looking at this, the idea of sustainability a little bit differently. And that to me is quality. That to me is sourcing the fabrics and sourcing the factories and everything. There's a lot of noise at the moment to buy clothes, if you understand this. There's a lot of choice. Yeah. And there's a lot of noise you have to listen to about sustainability and longevity or fast fashion and everything else. So what I believe in is that, if you want something that rivals most luxurious brands, it's an attainable cost. We've looked at sustainability, and we've put wellness into factor. We've ticked all those boxes. We've done all the work for you, should we say. So it's, when you open up and you're looking for that white T-shirt, well, we said it in our product, there's your ultimate white T-shirt. I believe it's the best on the market at the moment. And that's what we try and do with every piece that we produce.
After being in the fashion industry for many years and now designing clothes yourself, what's your creative process like? How do you generate your own inspiration for creativity?
I wouldn't say I'm designing. I'm not the designer. Claire Staines is the designer, along with Paige in Wellwear. We get together as a team. I have my ideas of where the brand needs to be, and with the creative vision and the clothing. It has to appeal to me, but of course it has to appeal to a wider market. I'm not just making clothes for me. So we have to understand where we think, not necessarily what the trends are of today, because I don't believe in following trends. I believe you set trends. And yeah, they're our goals, really, at the end of the day. But our fundamentals of whatever we are making is the fundamentals of how we started the brand, which is what we talk about in the ethos of Wellwear. So there are discussions, there are arguments, there are ways, we're going into many different categories now, and the way that looks, and of course the way people are shopping, the way people are dressing. The pandemic changed a lot of that for a start, but before that was changing into much more of a relaxed dressing down nature, less away from tailoring, less away from suits in the office. But how do you recreate that in, as we say, the most stylish way of being comfortable? And that's what we look at all the time.
What is the vision with the company? What do you envision this going into, in 5-10 years from now? Have you?
I mean, I very rarely tell my goals to people or where it's going to be. Where it's we have our essentials and we have our, as I said, our brand ethos of where we want to be. That's you know, I think people understand that, where you know that won't change. The categories we go into is up to us, where we see we can produce and rival and a gap in the market, or so that's I know where I would like to go. You know, there's a lot of, as I moving the chessboard about a bit to make sure that happens, but we all need to make sure that this is where we're going. That's what we do. We are, you know, sort of sometimes 6 months, I'm a year into thinking where we're going. 6 months is where we're designing. So when people see, they're seeing our launch, you know, at the moment of autumn winter, which we've changed in a year to how we launched one big collection. Now we think it's a better way of launching every 2 to 3 weeks, a different drop, to give people newness, to give their creativity newness, different creativity, all that. So we've completely swapped around. As I was telling you earlier, people's touch point to an e-commerce brand or direct consumer is the e-commerce images, not necessarily the campaign. So we've changed that around a year. Things are constant. This is within, not even within a year, you know, within like the last 6 months, we've decided to completely change that. And we're still trying to do all this within an attainable pricing point for everyone, which I think we're achieving in many, many ways. So the world really in the categories that we're going to go in is our oyster in many ways. We're not going to go into tailored suits.
Yeah.
That's something very, very different. You know, that's an art in itself. That's something we won't do. But we do have our easy set, which is our version of an everyday suit in many ways. So, but it's not tailoring. Two completely different things.
Throughout interviews and people you met, kind of like this in a podcast or for press in the past as well, what are some of the questions that nobody has asked you that you know, either that you've been wanting to lift or that you just felt, you know, this is interesting that they never asked about?
I mean, one of the things that always amazes me is nothing to really do with asking questions, but is actually when we were talking about, you know, university and schools and the direction we're going to go in is you start, you know, higher education. It just seems to be the ultimate goal. And it was always this area before that where I said I was clearly into design and I was car mad and car passionate. And I was always intrigued why teachers or anyone at that point ever came up to you to ask you, what's your passion? You know, because often it's that passion that you should go into. And no one ever did that. And, you know, I think that would have been, if you would actually looked and people say, well, very good at, you know, design is obviously something important to you. Cars are obviously something important to you. But it's that sort of quizzitive nature of people asking, where do you actually want to go? Instead it was just, what do you want to study at university? And you'd go, am I going to? I am going to university then, and that's where you have to think about all the time. It's like that's your goals of where you want to be. But and it's it's an intriguing sort of thing to think about again, though. It's like people, but in interviews, it's I've been asked some weird and wonderful things over the time, but.
And my last question for you is, what would you like to ask my next guest? Not knowing who it is.
Oh, wow. Difficult question. Not knowing who that person is so difficult, isn't it? It's like, straight when you said that, I wonder who his next guest is. I should have looked who his next guest is. So that's an intriguing one. Really, really difficult. I don't think I can even answer it. It's like, it's mad. It's a really funny one, actually. You said, are you happy at the moment? That's a funny question to ask someone. I've been asked it a few times, and I go, are you thinking about that moment? Are you thinking over life? Are you thinking... regret is always an interesting one to ask people, if they have regrets or not. I've always kind of intrigued whether people do it, how you work that into someone. Some people seem to work on, you know, whether they have regrets or not. I always say you learn more from making mistakes than you do sometimes your successes.
Do you have any regrets?
No, that's what I'm kind of saying. I don't think there's a point of having regrets. As long as you learn from, everyone makes mistakes. Hopefully you learn from them. If you don't learn from them, I think that's the definition of insanity, isn't it? That if you keep on doing the same thing expecting a different result. So yeah, it's I think that's it. You learn from them and you try never to make those again. I think that's basically it. But some people, I think, can hold on to regrets and not try and sort of progress from that. But it's an intriguing thing how people's minds work in that way. It's always an interesting, something to ask someone.
I'm going to ask my next guest whether they have any regrets.
And I will look forward to that question.
I think that's a good question. David, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
It's been an honor to have you here. I'm looking forward to all the success with the brand, with the house, with the family, to follow it.
Hopefully.
And check out David Gandy Wellwear. What's the website? How do you find it?
davidgandywellwear.com. Yeah.
Same on social media handles?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.